and welcome to today's webinar brought to you by The Space. It's a really practical session looking at how to make the most of Instagram, how you can increase engagement, how you can really get to grips with it. I'm Linda Coburn, I'm the moderator of the webinars for The Space, and our guest today is Ned Potter, who is has massive experience working with public libraries, looking at social media. He's advised, he's consulted, and when I started working in this area, all I heard was how great Ned was, how practical his advice was. So that's what we're going to do today. We've got a group of librarians from all around the Midlands with us, and they've put some questions to us already, and there will be more questions as the session goes on. So Ned, let's start we've got Sarah Coulson with us. Sarah, would you like to ask your question to Ned, and that'll kick us off? We'll have to get you to unmute, Sarah.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah, Ned, we're Leicestershire Library Service. We're just starting with Instagram, and we really want just the good practice, the good key messages, how we can keep that flow and grow users. And I've got my colleague Victoria Barton here as well, who'll be asking questions throughout the session.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you, Sarah. So yeah, I think when you're just starting out on Instagram, one of the most important things to consider is the fact that it is a different demographic to Facebook. There is overlap, but it is different. And because they're both owned by Meta, sometimes it's easy to think that they're sort of, different versions of the same thing, but they're not. They are very different. And one of the ways in which they're different is there is a younger audience on Instagram. It's not that Instagram's only full of young people, but it's just that you may have seen that stat. I think in 2012, 92% of teens were on Facebook, and in 2022, 10 years later, only 32% of teens were, and it's dropped since then as well. So we know that there's a kind of younger audience on Instagram because one of the places they're going when they leave Facebook is Insta. So it's very tempting to set things up to just kind of cross-post to both platforms, but actually it's worth trying to think, if it's at all feasible, how can I use these differently? And one of the simplest things to do is to say, right, we're going to aim the Facebook audience, sorry, the Facebook content at a slightly older demographic, and the Instagram content at a slightly younger demographic. And it's not, I'm not saying extremes, where you'd sort of do stuff about applying for pensions on Facebook and stuff about story time on Instagram, but there is definitely a difference there in how people use the platforms. So I think one of the most important things about starting off on a platform is just the mechanics of it, because it is, I think, more complicated than every other platform that we use, because there are different content types on it in a way that Twitter or Blue Sky or Facebook doesn't quite, even TikTok doesn't quite kind of tax us in the same way. So a really important thing for Instagram, I think, for making it work is mixing up the content types. And in short, there's sort of three main types. There's just your basic posts to the grid. So photographs normally, or they can be videos, but the grid is so cool because when you click on someone's profile, it looks like a grid. And then there are Reels, which are Instagram's attempt to take on TikTok. It's videos, they're kind of portrait-shaped videos. And then there are Stories. And for me personally, when I started to use the Instagram for my library, I found Stories the hardest thing to get my head around exactly what they were for and how to use them. So Stories disappear after 24 hours. And they only appear to people who actually click on your profile. So I think maybe I should, if I just get something up on the screen, so I can show you what that looks like. I wonder if I've got anyone handy that I can. Yeah, let me just share my screen. Hopefully you are seeing San Francisco Public Libraries on the screen here. And you can see that this is a massively successful account. They've got 50,000 followers, and it's called the grid because it looks like a grid when you're kind of hovering over things. And it's worth noting that when you're on a PC like this, unless someone's hidden their like count, you can just hover over any post and see what the likes and comments are, which is a really, really handy way to find out what works and what doesn't for other libraries. So you can see that there is just posts, what I would call regular posts. There is Reels, which is their portrait videos. And then because they've got this circle around, they've got an active story at the moment. So to see their stories, you do actually have to click on their thing. So stories are a bit more they're very much aimed at your existing followers rather than new potential users. And basically, my number one tip for any library, whether you're new to the platform or not, is to make a strategic use of all three of these types of platforms, all three of these types of content. So as a basic rule of thumb, my starting off point would be I would post once to the grid per week. I'd post one reel per week, and I try and post at least a story every day during the week, not necessarily weekends if that's not feasible. I think that's a nice mixture, because I don't think you need to push yourself to be constantly, like, oh, we're new, we must put loads and loads of posts on the grid all the time. You don't need to feel that pressure. But the stories, which are the easiest thing to do because you don't need them to be like visually exciting, they can just be text. They're the things that are most like just a regular Facebook post or a regular tweet, where they can just be basic updates, time sensitive stuff, things that are happening in the library that day, little updates. So you can kind of keep those ticking over day to day, but don't feel like you constantly have to post stuff to the grid or constantly post reels, because you don't. So I would say that's a kind of starting off point, if that makes sense, Sarah. But if there's anything about that you want to go into more detail on, that's great. But I'm conscious that I've already talked for quite a long time, and I've only just started talking, so I don't want to keep banging on about stuff without other people getting a chance to ask stuff as well. But I hope that makes sense. So basically mixing up the content types, because it's very easy just to fall into essentially just posting pictures to the grid. And that's okay, but it does work better when you mix it up with the odd video, and particularly when you use stories for that kind of slightly more functional day-to-day content that works well there, rather than on the grid where it doesn't work as well.
That's great. Thank you very much, Ned. Really helpful advice.
Anybody else got a follow-on question? Okay, so Ned, have you got is there an example of a library that's doing this really well that you could share with us?
Yeah, if what I quite like to do is show you a library so one of the questions that came up in the previous webinar that the Space have done on this, which was basically like, if you've got three tips for posting on Instagram, what would it be? And one of those tips would be to not post pictures of words to the grid. The biggest issue that I see amongst libraries is that they're posting pictures of words and they're not getting engagement. And it's really important to realize that the way that Instagram works is engagement, which basically means, is someone pressing the like button, or is someone pressing the save button, or is someone pressing the comment button, or is someone pressing the send it on to someone else via text or email button. So that's engagement, but mainly likes, but the other things count too. If you don't get engagement, you don't get any reach. So you could post something on another platform and it would reach a certain amount of people. And if you get a few more likes, it reaches a few more people. With Instagram, you really don't reach anyone, regardless of how many followers you've got, unless you get engagement. It's almost like if I were to tell you lot something in this space now, in this webinar, if you thought it was useful, then it would travel outside of this webinar, and you tell people in the rooms that you're in, and they tell other people, and then it would go and grow and grow. If you didn't think it was useful and didn't tell anyone, it would literally just stay in this room. It's like that with Instagram. If you post something and no one presses the like button, it will just absolutely stall right there. No one will ever see it. And so you need engagement to get the reach, because otherwise, however, you could have thousands of followers, but literally no one's seeing your stuff unless you can get them to engage with it in some way. So if we look at, I'll just go back to sharing my screen. I'm hoping that, so can I just ask, Linda, if I switch to Newcastle, are you seeing Newcastle now, or is it still on San Francisco in the share?
No, I can see Newcastle.
Okay, perfect, brilliant, thank you.
It's
right,
quite small. Can everybody read that? Let's just check.
To be honest, you don't need to be able to read it in detail. I just want to show you some broad stuff. So here we have an example of a very, very, very popular account, right? 50,000 followers, way beyond what most public libraries in the UK could ever aspire to. So very, very popular. It's going well. They're doing great. So you can see there's a mixture of content that they've put here. And there is a bunch of stuff where it is essentially, this is what I would call in the pictures of words category. So it's got a picture of the sort of cover of The Last of Us. There's pictures of some books here. There is an interview with Alex 415 thing there. So all of these, as you can see, have got what would be a perfectly respectable number of likes for a normal account, but for a 50,000 follower account is really, really low. And what this means is that no one will be seeing this. It doesn't matter they got 50,000 followers. They just won't reach any of those followers with these posts because it hasn't got the engagement. When they start not posting pictures of words, so 268 likes there, 110 likes there, 357 likes there, 1,600 likes there, that's what they should be getting, because they're doing what Instagram works well with, which is essentially captured images or videos. So the stock photography doesn't work, pictures of words doesn't work. So we're back to 52 again for that one. We're back down to 40 for this one. You know, it's the same with every account ever. They'll get good engagement when they've got organically captured pictures or videos, and they'll get poor engagement when they've got words on the screen. So that is an example of a super successful account that is not quite doing it consistently across the board. Here's an example of a normal account, which is Newcastle, who I think are doing well. They've managed to avoid the pictures and words. They've kind of got the message. They've got far fewer likes per picture because they've not got 50,000 followers, but they are consistently getting relatively similar amounts of likes, and they're kind of doing fine, and it's working okay for them. So the advice is that we need to take our own photos, not use stock pictures. Exactly that, Victoria. I would say that in every other context, that kind of stuff is fine. On Facebook, it's fine. On Blue Sky, it's fine. But on Instagram, it just doesn't work. Stock photography doesn't work. And the thing is, if I'm wrong, and basically, this is general advice, which I've seen to be true, I'm going to say 100% of the time. But if it turns out that in your case I'm wrong, you don't have to do this. But if you just look at your own engagement of your own account and look what the stock photography pictures get versus the captured pictures get, look what the pictures of words get versus the non-pictures of words, you'll see the huge leap in engagement that you get when you're doing the stuff that essentially Instagram wants you to do. So if I just let me just get this. Sorry. Okay. So in answer to the basic question, my favorite one that I think is working best in the public library context, I'm afraid it's in the US, is Miami-Dade Public Library. And I think they are the model to follow if you want to look at a library doing Instagram well, making it work. So you can see that they pretty much always avoid the pictures of words stuff. There's a little bit of it there when they get much less engagement, but mostly it is pictures of fun stuff. People love interior spaces of libraries. People like old stuff. They like fun stuff. And it works really well. It's kind of, it's got a bit of a feel to it, but you don't need a consistent art photography style or anything like that. You just need pictures of stuff, videos of things. They've got some reels on here as well, and reels tend to do very well. Reels get much more reach than pictures. Instagram wants people to use reels, so you can see they've got 11,000 views for this, 7,000 views for that. So they're really reaching people with this stuff. And they've also got pinned stories. So I mentioned the stories disappear after 24 hours. If you want to, you can pin them, which means that they stay in these little themes that you can curate yourself and set up however you want. So this is the pin story for events. So you can see there's a story there for an event, and then it's just going to tick onto this next story there for an event. So you can kind of pull stuff together in a place that makes it stick around. So for me, Miami-Dade is the example of a library that does it really, really well. And I just want to show you that reach thing. If I can just bring up, obviously, the only way to kind of guarantee numbers is to look at your own account. So I just want to show you my own library's stats here. So share the PowerPoint presentation. So here's an example of, on the left-hand side, we've got a post that I knew wasn't going to work because it doesn't work well in Instagram to post essentially like good photography of prosaic stuff doesn't do very well. You don't need to be good at pictures. You just need to take pictures of arresting things, right? So here is, we had acquired the Frankie Howard archive. If anyone remembers Frankie Howard, I wanted to help our archives out by posting about it. I knew it wasn't going to work. It's just a picture of a briefcase. It's a lovely picture, but it's not something interesting. So it got 15 likes. And as a result of that, it only reached 392 people. Here is a much more typical picture of something that would work on Instagram, which is a picture of the library itself. That's got 95 likes, and as a result, well over twice as many people have seen it. So it's reached 834 people. So engagement equals reach. if I'd have just posted a picture of the library with some stuff in the comments about the Frankie Howard archive, I would have reached more people because I would be doing the thing that works well in the context of Instagram. So there's a myth that people don't read the captions, but they do generally. This is another example again, where I've done a much more popular post still. This has got 312 likes, and as a result, it's reached 1,870 people. So my maths isn't good enough, but that's at least 4 times as much as the first one. So
why is that one so much more popular?
it's just a mixture of it's actually because of it's a nice picture of the library in the first place. You know, people love interior of library pictures on Instagram. It also had a very heartfelt message aimed at the audience, and the caption just sort of captured a particular vibe for a particular audience at the time, and captions and pictures, when they work well together, tend to get better engagement. So it's just it's reached more people, and if these were higher, if there'd been more comments or more people sending stuff on, or more bookmarks, then the reach would have been higher still, because it's all about that engagement to get the reach, if that makes sense.
Lovely. Any more questions for Ned about any of that? Any clarification or dig a bit deeper into anything?
So just to pick up while people are having a think, the no pictures of words is one of the things that I would always say is a key thing. The 2 other tips, if we're doing 3 tips, would be to mix up the content, which we've already talked about in response to Sarah's question. And then the other thing is to use stories for anything that is time sensitive, because the way that the algorithm works is it doesn't show people stuff in real time. And quite often nowadays, it's actually getting more and more delayed as to the gap between everybody seeing your post and when you post your post. So if you do something like, let's say that tomorrow your library has got one of its rooms is closed for refurbishment, it won't be open. If you post tomorrow morning to the grid with a photo or picture of words saying it's closed, people are just not going to see it until after the closure's finished and you've reopened again. You've got to use stories for that time sensitive stuff, because stories people see in the moment, whereas we've noticed people liking pictures on our feed even a week after we posted them now, because there's such a delay in the way that the algorithm kind of feeds it through to people in different ways. So use stories for boring stuff, text only stuff. Pictures and words work fine on stories. You can use stories for links. All of this kind of functional day-to-day stuff stories is great for. And save the grid for, as I say, captured pictures of your library or videos, and that's what works well on those particular bits of the Instagram thing.
Thank you. Can we go back through some of the questions that were asked? We've got some questions from before. Somebody was asking here, so this is a general question, but it might spark some more thoughts from you. We just set up our Instagram account, would like some help building up followers and ideas of posts to put out. So you're talking a lot about the kinds of content and thinking about how making your captions and your pictures work together. But what about what kind of ideas, what kinds of posts might help people to build up their followers? Is there anything else you'd want to say about that?
Yeah, so I think the main thing, and this would apply to all social media, it's not an Instagram specific thing, is to focus on engagement, and followers will happen of their own accord, rather than focusing on trying to build followers per se, which I know sounds like a kind of semantic nicety, but what I mean is if you post stuff that people respond to, that will result in more and more people discovering the account and more people following it. Whereas if you sit down and think, how can we get more followers? What should we do for that? It often doesn't actually result in followers arriving. So the main thing I would do is engage the existing audience you have as much as possible. And then what you'll find is the follower count will just essentially go up on its own as a result of what you're doing. So if you think about that thing about, you can just hover over your own posts. You don't need to be some sort of analytics guru to do this. You can just literally look at your last 10 posts and you can say, well, of those 10, 3 of them actually did really, really well. 4 of them seem to just be kind of, mid. And then the other 3 just didn't get much response. So what is it about the 3 at either end that we can identify? Like what was particularly successful? Was it the time of day? Was it the framing of the caption? Was it the type of content on the post? Was it the kind of thing we were talking about with regards to what library service it is? And vice versa with the unsuccessful ones. What can we do more of that works best, and what can we do less of that doesn't work well? And that is enough if you start doing more of the things that are going down well with your particular community and getting engagement and likes from your particular audience, then that will inevitably lead to more engagement and then more followers, and then you'll build the account from there. So I think the mixture of content helps with that as well. And the other thing is to look at other libraries. And I think there's a real art to choosing which libraries to steal from. So first of all, there's no point in looking at like the British Library or whatever, or Orkney Library, for example. These libraries that have got such huge cultural heft, they are very good at it as it happens, but what they're doing is their success is partly due to their own kind of cultural capital rather than the actual content that they're putting out. And we could never aspire to be like the BL anyway, because they're just this unique thing, right? So much as I love the BL's Instagram, it is very good, I wouldn't look at it as an example to follow because it's not really relevant to most of us. We can't really aspire to that. So what I would do is I would look at libraries that you like, and I would look at the content and see whether it is getting engagement. So again, you have to divorce yourself from do I like this or think it's good, and just look at the likes and the comments, and where they are getting those likes and comments, you can say, well, what is it that's happening there? Can we do more of that? And then you'll kind of build up a bit of a head of steam from there. So yeah, I think those are the kind of things that are absolutely key. And just to pick up on a question that Nicholas put, can you Instagram from desktop these days, or does it all have to be from a mobile device? Yeah, you can. There's three myths I think about Instagram that's really important to bust. One of them is you have to be a good photographer. You absolutely don't. It's really about what you're photographing, not the quality of the photography. One is that no one reads the captions. They do, so you can actually write stuff in the captions. And one is that, and I can understand why this one exists, you have to be on a mobile device, because you did used to have to be on a mobile device, but they've changed it, and you can now use it from a desktop. There is a few limitations on the desktop, certainly in terms of Instagram stories. You don't get as many options as you do if you're using a mobile device, but you can use it from a desktop, and it is perfectly possible just to have like a stock of your own photographs that you or other people in the library have taken on a shared drive somewhere that you can all access, and then you can just post them from your PC or your laptop. You don't have to be actually using a mobile device. And if it's all right, Linda, I'm just going to pick up on another question that relates somewhat to that. I think someone asked earlier, it's now up the comments, so I'm sorry for not attributing the question with this. Someone asked about sort of having almost like a fake account so that you can have your Instagram for the library without it being attributed to like one person. So it's not like Nicholas's Instagram account is the library. So all I can tell you is what we do at my own institution is we have a sort of a generic Gmail account that we used to sign up for Instagram. So it's not my email that I'm using for the Instagram. It is a sort of a one that we set up specially to do this with. And that means we can give that username to a couple of people that are posting to the account. So A, you don't have to do it from a desktop, and B, you don't have to do it from kind of your own personal account, but with the name of the library in it, if you don't.
Are you able to share with us the Instagram name for your institution?
Yeah, so it's UOY Library is our Instagram account, but it is a university library rather than a public library.
Yes, you're still trying to reach a kind of wide audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Victoria said my favorite library Instagram is Holton Library Service. So that is great. I love a recommendation. So check out Holton Library Service. See what you think of it, because it's always good to get examples from people of what they think is good.
And somebody else mentioned Lincolnshire, said they'd got some really good posts
Lincolnshire,
as well.
yeah. And if as Leicester have just started, if we can all helpfully follow Leicester to get them. Although that said, in all seriousness, like there's an advantage to having lots of followers. There's a sort of a wisdom of crowds thing, which is that if people see, oh, this Instagram followers number in the thousands, then they're potentially more likely to think it's good. That said, we do need engagement from our audience, not from the industry. I would see that the cake is our community, and the cherry on top of the cake, or the icing on the cake, is anything else. So much as it's lovely if other librarians like our content, or if other libraries literally pressing the like button on content, that can sometimes mask what's actually going on. What we need to do is get engagement from our audience that we're trying to reach, our target audiences. and see anything else as a sort of bonus. And sometimes you see libraries that are doing ostensibly kind of quite well on the platform, but when you look at who's actually engaged with the content, it's just the rest of us. It's just us, the library people, and that's nice, but it's not necessarily what we're there to try and do when we put our time and effort into Instagram.
Can I sort of go back a bit? I'm mindful the question was asked quite early on, and don't want to lose it. So it's a little sort of what you're saying about engagement, but the person, I think it was Nicholas, was asking about how do you engage other staff? And
Oh yeah.
Ned, it might not be a question for you. I suspect this is a challenge for everybody when you're trying to get something new or new to you off the ground. But it's about how, so I might ask everybody for thoughts or ideas of how do you get the people you need in your service to help you and support you and be on side with you. So I'll to you, Ned, and then just see if other people might have comments to add in.
Yeah, and yeah, Victoria, I see you, and I'll answer that question in a sec. Yeah, so there are definitely things that help, but I don't want to be glib about this because it is just an issue, and I don't just have a kind of solution where oh yeah, if you just do what this thing, and it's absolutely fine, everybody buys into it. But there are things that help. One of the things is to identify people who use the platform for themselves anyway, because they've got an instant head start with not feeling that sense of fear of this is quite complicated and I'm a bit embarrassed about not knowing what I'm doing with that's a story, that's a reel, what's this, what's that. So if you've got people who are like, yeah, I'm on Instagram for myself, then that's a kind of a head start. They're more likely to be in it. And I feel like it's okay to just give a few people access to the account. And you're very unlikely to duplicate content in the way that you might, for example, on Twitter or Blue Sky. So I'm comfortable with a number of people at my institution having access to the Instagram and contributing to it. We do talk about it collectively, but also people can just kind of do stuff for themselves. But I think the main thing is having support so that people feel like they know the framework within which they are operating, rather than having to check everything up a chain or not know what they're doing. So I've written quite detailed guidance for everyone who uses Instagram for my library. And it says, this is the way in which we do it, just in terms of mechanics. This is the tone we're going for, but specifically, use your own voice. Don't feel like you have to sound like me when I'm doing the Instagram. I think consistency is overrated in that sense. I think it's okay to have more than one style in the same account, because what you don't want to do is smooth out all the rough edges and nobody have any personality in the post at all. It's better to have more than one personality than to be generic and corporate. So it says about the tone, and then it's got examples, literally like 4 or 5 different categories of things that have worked well for us. So this is this is interior of the building type posts. This is strong message type posts. This is fun and frivolous type posts, because fun stuff's important because it builds up the audience. Then you get a bigger captive audience for the less fun stuff. So it really shows people examples of what they can do. And then it talks about accessibility, and it says the responsibility for Instagram is with me. It's with Ned Potter. I'm saying that not to refer to myself in the third person, but so that you don't think that it's me, meaning it's with them. I mean, it's with me. So if they make a mistake or something goes wrong, it is fundamentally on my shoulders. And I think that's important because it frees people up a bit to feel like they're not, it's quite a big deal to be the voice of the library on a platform. So it's nice to have the reassurance that if something does go wrong, or you mispost, or you accidentally do the wrong thing, fundamentally it's on the person who manages the social media for the library, not on each individual person. I think that helps as well. So structure, guidance, a framework, examples, all of these things help people. And if someone expresses an interest, you can say, yeah, I would love it if you can get involved, and here is the guidance, like here's what I would ask you to be doing, so you can get a sense of it. And that's more likely to sort of convert them into actually becoming a person who's helping than someone who thinks, oh yeah, I quite like to do that, but I'm not quite sure if it's for me or whether I could do it. So all of these things help. And obviously, as Linda says, if anyone else has got other things that have helped them, let us know in the chat or out loud as to what's worked.
I think I know that in our team, when something's gone well, we've had lots of lovely mentions. The information is sent round so we can all enjoy the successes. They don't have to be huge, but you just think, yes, it's working.
Record the wins 100%. Absolutely, yeah. If you get good stuff that happens, then it's really nice to have a record of that, because in the moment you feel like, oh, this feedback's amazing, I'll never forget this, but actually 6 months down the line you have forgotten it, and it's good to have a record of what's what's been successful for sure.
Yes, yes. And I suppose just being kind of open. I remember, you know, at the last session we did, one of the librarians was talking about how she was sort of constantly at the ready to kind of pounce on good moments and capture them.
Yeah.
So
yeah, if anyone else wants to weigh in, go for it. I'll just pick up Victoria's question, if that's all right, in the chat.
Yeah, do.
About promoting a library event on Instagram. So
Yes.
I think there's a slightly different situation if it's the very first time you've done the event. If it's the second time, then one of the best things to do is have a video of the previous event, because reels tend to do very well. And they tend to reach non-followers as well as followers. So you're more likely to ensnare other people who would follow the library if they knew you were on Instagram, but they don't necessarily already know that you're there. So I would use if that is an option, I would have a video kind of the previous event. I think it's really important to, if you've got any kind of booking for an event, to link to the booking from your stories and from your bio. So you may well have seen people put like link in bio, because you can't really put a link in the caption of a post. Like you can, but it's not tappable or clickable, so no one can really use it. So if you want someone to have a link to an Eventbrite, or just a link to register their interest, or just a link to here's more details about the event, you need to put it in your bio. And a tool that I would recommend is Linktree, which is a helpful way of basically your bio link is your Linktree link, and then you can have multiple links within your Linktree to multiple events if you want. And then you can promote the event on stories, and you can put URLs in stories, so you can link to a page about the event, or you can link to tickets or whatever. So that helps as well. I think there's a real, I don't know what you think about this, Victoria. It might be that my take on it isn't quite right, but I feel like there is a right amount of lead-in time to promoting an event, which is a really fine line. If you go too early, it's not immediate enough for people to act on it and actually put it in their diary or book a thing. But obviously, if you leave it too late, they might have made other plans. So I'm actually quite wary of doing full promotion like a month in advance of an event, because I feel like that's I might do a little bit of a soft thing, like this is coming, if you're interested, check it out. But when it comes to a full push, I tend to do that closer to the event itself, because I feel like it needs to be within that window of someone going, oh yeah, I'm actually going to go to that. I'm adding it to my diary or my calendar. I'm booking the thing, which if it's 5 weeks away, sometimes doesn't happen. But that's just my own experience. It might be that your window with your community is different, and other things work. So the final thing I'd say on that is, we're talking about Instagram in isolation today because it's an Instagram-based webinar. But in reality, it works best when you use it in conjunction with other platforms. So if I was promoting an event, Instagram would be one arm of my promotion, and I would also be using potentially Facebook, depending on the demographic. I might even be using, there's nothing wrong with like actual posters in the building. I might be using screens. I might be putting stuff in a newsletter. I might be putting a news item on the website. But the important thing is that we tend to not act on a piece of marketing the first time we see it. Like, we don't just see something we want to do and go, oh, that's brilliant, drop everything and go and do it straight away. That's not quite how marketing tends to work. It's often more successful when it builds awareness of something over a period of time. And it's often the second or the third or fourth time someone sees something that they actually change their behavior from what they were going to do before. So, if you think about your own life, you could see an advert for something and go, oh, that looks brilliant, but that's still not the same as showing up for that thing. So if you can put it on Instagram, and in the same week it's on Instagram, it's also in a newsletter, and then it's also on Facebook, then you've got the much more likelihood that someone goes, oh yeah, I saw this in the newsletter, I was going to book that. And then they actually book it because they get that second prompt when you're doing it on Instagram. So promoting a library event on Instagram works best when you're also promoting it not on Instagram at the same time, because you've got a higher chance of reaching people a second time with the same information, which is often what they need to kind of push them over the top towards actually, coming to the thing, or putting it, or talking to their spouse, or, whatever it is about changing the behavior to actually show up at the event.
Thank you. Ned, Emily's had put a question in, and she's just rewritten it. So it's the last question is really about piggybacking on
social media trends. Okay, so this is a great question, and I have to say, I'm not sure that my take on this would be the typical one from the kind of people who bang on about library marketing. I'm not a fan of jumping on trends, even though it can be very, very productive. There's a couple of reasons for this. One is I find it emotionally exhausting to be just poised to try and do a thing because everybody else is doing an impression of Lady Gaga. We somehow have to find someone to do an impression of Lady Gaga for the library. That kind of stuff. Like I want social media to be fun and rewarding for people rather than a millstone around the necks. So I'm somewhat reluctant to jump on a trend unless there's a really, really easy in for us as the library. So there was a trend recently, which was, you may have seen this on Instagram. It's like, it's the library, but make it Wes Anderson. And so people were doing videos of their library in the style of a Wes Anderson film. And some of them were absolutely brilliant. And I really liked them, actually. I could imagine us doing something and that being fun to do. However, at the time that trend was happening, I simply did not have the capacity to plan and then film a pastiche of a well-known filmmaker for the library, and I was fine with that. Like, it would have been nice to do, but I'm not there beating myself up going, oh, we need to jump on the trend, because I think that, again, that leads to a kind of stress and an anxiety. However, I have occasionally jumped on trends when it's just been incredibly easy to do so, because there's an obvious connection between the trend and something that my specific library offers. So I haven't had to sit there thinking, right, how can we crowbar us into this existing conversation? If there's an easy way in, I'm much more happy to do it. But the other thing is, like, if you remember recently, there was a Gen Z trend where people would read out stuff that had been ostensibly written by a Gen Z person about there's lots of museums did very well with this, that they would say things like, come to the such and such museum, there's no cap, because no cap is a phrase that is used by young people apparently. And there was loads of people who got masses of engagement with this, including some libraries. And I'm really happy for all of them. I think it's brilliant. But again, if you look at the cake analogy, of those 100,000 views, probably 90,000 would be icing and only 10,000 would be cake. Like, there will be other people who had nothing to do with the library and could never hope to visit the library who are thinking, this is great content, this is really funny. And they're not actually going to affect the bottom line of the library. They're not going to visit Leicestershire libraries more. They're not going to go to the website of Dudley Library more than they were before. Do you know what I mean? So there's I know that we want to be like getting onto these trends, but I would say don't put pressure on yourself to do this. Only do it if there's a really straightforward thing that you can think, well, here's where we fit into this trend, let's make it happen. Because sometimes it could be a lot of work, and sometimes the rewards are sort of flattering to deceive, because you get a lot of attention, but not necessarily from your community that you're trying to reach. So I don't want to be down on trends. I think they can be fun, but I also don't want people to feel like they need to be pressured to respond to them, if that makes sense. Yeah, so thanks for Googling no cap, Victoria. There was loads of other phrases as well. Yeah, that's so to basically boil it down, Emily, I would say use them if you want to and you think there's an easy way to do so, but don't feel like you should be jumping on trends. It's perfectly possible to do successful social media without doing so, would be my take on that. Other takes might vary.
There's Tim's made a comment about the jumping on a trend, and at 1446, Ned, there's a technical question from Charlotte. So I'm just sort of making sure we work through them. The ones, can you see that?
Yes, so we had a social media team, send finished videos between each other on WhatsApp. The quality of the video diminishes when sending via this way. What's the best way to share videos to then upload them to social media? Yeah, that is a good technical question. I mean, there's a certain amount of compression that will happen on social media anyway. So you're never like, it's probably going to be potentially somewhat reducing the quality overall. And I do think that the subject of the video is much more important. Like, obviously we don't want it to be super blocky and rough around the edges, but basically what I'm saying is an absolutely pristine 4K video of something prosaic isn't going to get as well responded to as a slightly lower res video of something that's actually visually arresting and interesting to the audience. So I wouldn't stress about it too much, but basically if you upload them to like a Google Drive or Team Drive or whatever, then you can download them from there onto a phone to post, or whoever's posting them can do it from there. And that will, in theory, not suppress or compress the quality in any way. So I would say that's probably the way to do that, Charlotte. But again, unless it's really, really massively making it a problem, it might be that you don't need to worry too much about it unless it's being shared multiple times back and forth, in which case obviously it will get smaller and smaller each time.
And Victoria's added to that and says she uses WeTransfer as another.
Oh yeah, WeTransfer would be great. Yeah, that's a kind of surefire hit. Yeah, so Nicholas says, sorry, Nicholas, just reading out your full name. Nicholas saying, was that the Museum of English Rural Life, the ones with the unit? I don't know if the Museum of Rural Life specifically got onto this trend, but they are brilliant at social media. But again, they're so different, the Merle, to any of the rest of us. Like, if I tried to do what the Merle does for my library, it wouldn't work because their audience is almost everyone rather than their specific community. And they're hilarious and they're brilliant, but they've got their own thing doing that I feel like we can't quite aspire to. So I'm always trying to pick libraries to aspire to that are doing something that's closer to my own sort of potential output than the Merle, who I think are fabulous, but they're just their own thing and they're almost a sort of a world apart.
Yeah, Merle being the Museum of English Rural Life. Yeah.
Yes.
We've not got very long left. And Ned, there was one other question that I wanted to put to you, but I'm just raising with everybody else. We've probably got another 5 minutes. So, and then we'll draw this recording to an end. So just to let everybody know, if you've got any other questions, you might want to stick them in chat or put your hand up. But in the meantime, I'm going to ask you, Ned. So we know how time poor everybody is. If you just had a couple of hours a week to manage an Instagram account, how would you prioritize time?
Okay, so I think when we're struggling for time, first of all, I think it is okay to be somewhat inconsistent with Instagram. It's not quite a news channel in the same way that some of the other social media things are. So if you do have a week where you don't post and then another week where you post a few times, I think that's okay. We don't need to fall into the trap of saying we must meet a specific quota or target of posts. I'd rather post when there's something to say than feel like, oh, it's Friday, I've still not done anything, I'll just put something out there, because it will inevitably not be very good and no one will respond to it. So I would say that if you're time poor, don't feel like, oh, whatever happens, I must post, because that's not the case. But I would say have a sort of a strategy of what you might want to do, and that would go back to that thing of trying to use stories every day if possible, and that would be feasible in this kind of scenario of 2 hours a week, I think. And then try to get, maybe a reel and a grid picture post out each week if that's feasible. And I would say think about, what is your library trying to achieve anyway, and how can Instagram help you achieve that? Because it's very easy just to do social media in a vacuum and just sort of show up and do it reactively. But if you're trying to think about, like, well, what are we trying, who are we trying to reach, and what sort of messages are we trying to get across? How can I use Instagram most productively in that time to further that? And something that we haven't touched upon today, but I think is really important, is that interactivity in Instagram tends to happen one-to-one more than it happens in comments. So if you're used to having lots of threaded reply type conversations in Blue Sky or Twitter, or you're used to people leaving comments on Facebook posts, it doesn't happen so much on Instagram. But people are very happy to direct message or respond to interactive things on Insta. So in Instagram stories, you can set up things where you you solicit responses, basically. So one of the things that we did on my library was say, can you describe the library in 3 words? And then people would type their responses, and then I posted back a kind of summary of all the things people said. Or we'll say, if you missed the library, haven't been for a while, what space would you like us to show you? People will type their responses, and then we'll post to stories photos of that space. People really, really respond to one-to-one interaction on Instagram. So if you're only got a limited amount of time, I would say try and use some of that for interactivity in all its forms. And the main way to do that is not to ask for comments under the posts, it's actually to do it in stories, because people, for whatever reason, feel more comfortable on this platform being one-to-one. And I would say, again, if you're time poor, make sure you check your DMs. So often at my own library still, we fall into the trap of missing a DM because it's in the requested tab, not the already people we've accept DMs from tab. And then we don't see it until the 3 days later or whatever. So if you've got limited time, make sure you're checking your messages. And if anybody's commented or messaged you, always reply, because you want to nurture that engagement by making people feel rewarded for doing so. So use the time that you have to ensure you've done any kind of admin in terms of replying, encouraging, and all that kind of stuff. And then focus on maybe a post or 2 a week on the main thing, but otherwise doing stories. And I think that's that's probably how I would use time limited time. And to be honest, we all are time limited. Like most people are in that situation. I know of no library where someone has just got full-time responsibilities to just do this. It just doesn't happen. So we're all in a similar boat with that. Yeah.
That's great. That's a really lovely extensive answer. Thank you very much, Ned.